Howdy folks, today we are going to be talking about HTTP methods. So HTTP methods are generally used for telling the server what type of action you want to perform, the general category of what it is you're trying to do. Let's get into it. So here's an example of a output from Insomnia. You can see the Insomnia user agent there, calling a search API. This part right here is the method. There are 5 main methods that we're going to look at, and they fall under 4 main categories. This is the CRUD that you may have heard before. CRUD stands for create, read, update, and delete. Now, there is 1 method for create, 1 method for read, 2 methods for update, and 1 for delete. As you can see here, this is the first thing that is sent to the web server. First, you tell it the method you're going to use. Oops. Then you tell it the actual API route that you're trying to hit with any parameters and the protocol. So it's very important because it is literally the first thing that your web server is actually going to see. So the get method is the first one. The get method is for fetching data. When you call this method, you are expecting to get a response. It's often used for search APIs or to try to get us more data on a specific object by ID. The URL path in this case, this, which comes before the question mark, is used to tell the server what type of data you want, or sometimes what action. For example, in this case, I'm API search. This is not a well-named API, to be honest. Normally, it would be something like API book or API library, and the search is kind of implicit with a get API. You can also have an ID on the end of this to get a specific element. The query is used to provide information about how the data should be formatted, sorted, filtered, that sort of thing. In this particular case, you can see I'm providing a query parameter, which is genre equals fiction. I want to search for fiction books. You could also have something here like maybe the limit or the pagination, or if you want it to be in JSON or CSV as a response. So query parameters are used heavily by this, not necessarily to modify data, but to modify what your result looks like, which is a little different. Get requests should never modify the data. That's important. Just to clarify, when I'm talking about never and should and commonly, things like that, I'm talking about RESTful APIs. You can, if you really want to in the code, make any of these methods do pretty much whatever you want with some technical limitations. The RESTful standard is what I'm going to go by here because that's very commonly used. And in the RESTful standard, a GET request should only be fetching existing data and never modifying data. So here's an example. It's kind of the same thing we saw before. You can see it's that get method. The path name tells me what I'm looking for, and then the query parameter tells me how I'm actually making use of that and how I'm going to change that data and how I'm going to filter that data. It doesn't change anything in the database, but it may change what results I get back. The post method is the next one. So the post method is used for object creation. The URL path indicates what type of object is being created. So if I had API post API / book, I would be creating a new book. Post requests almost always contain a body, but not always. The idea of creation is it can be bent. So for example, a login API is often going to be a post. Why is it a post? You're not creating a new user, but you are probably creating a new session for that user. And so you can see it's more the spirit of the thing. You don't have to actually directly be creating a row in a table to use post, but as long as something is coming into being that did not exist before is where you would use this. The URL query in this case is usually not actually used, and in fact usually most post requests don't even recognize it. You might send it to manipulate the response data though, because often or not, once a post method has created its object, it may actually return that object to you, or at least some identifier to let you know how to access that object, because otherwise you wouldn't really have a clue how to get access to it. And the URL query can occasionally be used to help you with that and help determine how that's manipulated. It's very rare to see, but it is possible. Again, by the RESTful standard, a post method should always result in the creation of a brand new object or entity. So here's an example of this. You can see our post. Here is the URL. There is, and now we have our content type, content length, and here is the body. This is how Insomnia prints it out. You can see this is a JSON body, and I'm creating a new book with the title Best Book, and the author is me. So that is a post, and I would expect as a response to get the ID, at least, of this book, maybe the whole object. Delete method. Delete, as may indicate from its name, is for removing an item or items plural. It is uncommon, I think, to have a delete method that removes multiple items, but it is a thing. Usually you have like an ID in that method to remove a single item, but you could also provide query parameters. It's unusual to have query parameters, but if you did have in there, it'd be similar to the get route where they determine what data should be removed. And again, the path is used for determining which type of item should be deleted. Here's an example of that. Delete API books 1. What I would expect with this is it would look up a book with ID 1 in that table and delete that row. Delete may perform various checks to verify if you're allowed to delete that item, things like that. There's nothing that says you can't do that, but it should always end either with an error or the item being deleted. Something I've seen as well is APIs where the thing didn't exist and the delete would still return a 200 OK rather than a 404. Because even though it didn't find the item, it didn't need to delete it, so it was kind of a no-op operation. So there's a little bit of flexibility you can have in here as well. So that's create, read, and delete. The put method is the first update method. The URL path, again, is used for determining which item to update, which type of item. The query is usually not used, similar to post. Put requests are expected to contain a body. Like a post request, the body of a put request should be the entire content of the object. Now, this is important. Any data or any field not included in the put body should be deleted. So if you have a table that has 4 fields in it and you get a put request with only 2, the other 2 fields should be marked null or deleted. Or there should be an error if they can't be null. That's an important thing. Put requests, when you get a put request, you're basically saying take what you have in the database and replace it verbatim with what I'm giving you right now. And as you might imagine, that has some drawbacks. Again, this is the RESTful standard for a put request. This is an example of the put request. Similar to the delete request, it has a specific ID or identifier usually to indicate which item to update. And it has a body, similar again to the post request. So the put can be kind of looked at as a combination of the delete and post. It is an update. It needs to know specifically what item to update and what data to update it with. Here I'm setting the title to blah and author to another person of book ID 5. The patch method. The patch method is also used for updating. Like the put, the URL path is used for determining what item type to update. The query is not used. Where the patch request differs from the put is if you give it a partial body. If you gave a partial body to the put, it would null those fields or delete them. If you give a partial body to the patch, it only updates those fields. So let's say you had an item with 300 different fields in it, which would be kind of large, but it has been known to happen. And you don't want to send every single one of those fields. You just want to change one field. You could use a patch request, just send that one field, and all those other fields will be the same. This is a key difference between put and patch. Put, every single field in the table has to be in here. Any field not in here gets deleted. Patch will only update fields in the body, and it will leave the rest alone. So here's an example of a patch. You can see it's similar to a put. It's just got a different method. It's still got that ID it's trying to get. The body, though, only has the title. Now, if this was a put request, we don't have our author. So if this is a put request, the author would actually get set to null or empty. But because it's a patch request, the author actually gets left alone and only the title gets changed. So you can see how patch and put are both useful in various situations. Patch is not capable of deleting a field, because if the field is missing, it just isn't updated. Put can delete a field, because if you give the entire amount of data and that field is missing, it's assumed that you want to delete it. Put is also very cumbersome though, because you have to pass the entire object with the changes you want, whereas patch, only the changes you want get passed in. There are also some patch examples that you can pass an additional field, like deleted keys to delete a field as well. I've seen that, but that's not common. So those are the 5 common methods that we use in HTTP. I hope this is helpful, and I'll see y'all next time.